Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast. This time I'm interviewing an old friend and colleague, Dr. George Thompson. George and I delivered avatar courses together for a number of years, mostly in Orlando and Florida, as George is based in America. He was a wonderful teacher, mentor, incredible colleague with so much great experience. And I just want to read out a very brief resume that tells you a little bit about George and his incredible credentials and his achievements. So George is a child psychiatrist and founder of the Listening Parent Community, an online support for parents based on DDP, Polyvagal Theory, and Thompson's 30-plus years of experience. He specialized in the residential treatment of traumatized youth and polyvagal-informed crisis response. As Medical Director of Crisis Services for ReDiscover Psychiatric Urgent Care Center in Kansas City and 2 psychiatric residential programs in Kansas, he focuses on creating emotionally safe, curious, coherent, and collaborative healthcare cultures. As neuroscience lead for SonderWorx, he trains community responders in trauma-informed and nervous system-informed care. Additionally, as a certified DDP therapist, Dr. Thompson develops parenting strategies that nurture a child's heartfelt knowledge that their lives matter to their families. That's beautiful. Community and future generations, regardless of the challenges they have faced. I want to read that again. It's so powerful. Develops parenting strategies that nurture a child's heartfelt knowledge that their lives matter to their families, community, and future generations, regardless of the challenges they have faced. Dr. Thompson was appointed chairman of the Polyvagal Institute's board of directors in June 2024 and also serves as a core faculty member for the Polyvagal Institute's certificate course. He's treasurer of the board of directors for the Kansas chapter of the National Alliance for Mental Illness. He was on the board of the DDP Institute from 2014 to 2020, serving as treasurer for that board as well. Dr. Thompson is the co-author of Polyvagal Theory and the Developing Child, as well as working with relational trauma in children's residential care. He is working on a third book due in 2026, The Polyvagal Parent. He is a volunteer clinical associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine, where he teaches compassionate doctor-patient communication, and the University of Kansas School of Medicine, where he supervises adult and child psychiatry residents. Dr. Thompson's research in medical education, particularly on medical professionalism, has been published in academic medicine and recognized with awards. He also teaches the Avatar course, promoting personal empowerment and compassionate service. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. So welcome everybody to this edition of the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast. George Thompson, Dr. George Thompson, welcome to this podcast. So good to see you.
It's awesome to be here, John. Glad I could make it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we've known each other for, God, how many years? I think that, we met delivering Avatar courses, and the first time I went to the US to deliver a course was, to do advanced course was the end of 2005. And I think I started delivering courses in the US in about 2009. So it's been a long time.
Maybe almost 20 years. That's very awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm really keen to have this conversation and talk to you about your work, because your background, as I've said in the intro, is in psychiatry, and you've done a lot of work around kids and parenting and those sorts of things. And I just think it's a fabulous subject, because so many of the men and women out there who are tuning into this podcast, one of their great struggles is whether they're doing a good enough job parenting their kids.
We get so much advice these days, and it's hard to know if we're doing a good job or not. And, some of the advice says do one thing, some says to do the opposite. How do you know if you're doing it right?
Well, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's like, I'm sure you met my stepdaughter, Sasha, when her her little girl was very young. She was very distressed and she wouldn't sleep. And poor old Sasha was walking the floor all night and she wasn't getting any sleep and she was exhausted. And I was chatting to her on the phone and I said, when does she sleep? And she said, when she's in bed with me. And I said, well, put her in bed with you. And she said, oh, but everybody's saying that that's really bad. And I said, darling, nobody has to know. That's your business. Get some sleep. She'll work it out and she'll find her own way back in her own bed eventually. And she did. But she was drowning in unhelpful advice.
Yeah. It turns out we have a brain inside of our brain called the caregiving brain.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're calm enough and connected with ourselves enough, then our caregiving brain comes online.
Yeah,
and
wow.
it tells us what to do. We know intuitively what to do as parents.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I read an amazing book many years ago called The Continuum Concept. And it was written by an American woman who had spent time in the UK and she was sort of like just bumming around really. And a friend said that he was going to South America to go and visit the Inca tribes. Would she like to come? And she found it fascinating and she was in awe of the way they parented their kids. So she went back and spent 7 years living with them and just observing and noticing how they raised their kids. And she wrote the book. And, just the way the parents are so relaxed and they allow the kids to just develop naturally as per their own self-nurture, I suppose. And I found that a very helpful book when I was a parent.
I read that book many years ago. I haven't thought about it in years. I wonder if I still have it around.
Yeah,
But I think you're right. Modern life gets us so keyed up that it's hard for us to be in touch with our natural instincts as parents.
Yeah, it's very, very true, isn't it? So you're a writer, you've written books. Tell me about the work that you're doing now, because we had a bit of a chat the other day and I was really impressed. I thought, wow, that's really cool perspective. I'd love to really dive in and explore that.
Well, the first book is about the polyvagal theory. That's a big word, but it's really about the nervous system. And the nervous system is designed to keep us alive and to keep us going in the right direction. You're in wellness. And so I know that you know about the autonomic nervous system, you know about fight and flight, you probably know about the shutdown response. The polyvagal theory says there's 2 branches of the vagus nerve, which is big in wellness these days. One of the branches puts us into that shutdown state, which is like an animal playing possum. It actually causes us to faint because that has some protective value. A predator doesn't want to eat a dead animal. But another branch of the vagus actually puts us into a relaxed and engaged state. And that relaxed and engaged state is where we can do our best parenting from. So it can apply to us, but if we know the state that our kid is in, that tells us a lot of important information as well. Because if our kid is in fight or flight, then our first job is to help them feel safe enough so that their nervous system can calm down. Like if we're going out the door and they have to have that special thing to go wherever they're going next, and that feels threatening to them to not have it, then their nervous system is a little bit in fight or flight. And if you don't help them get calmed down from that, you're not going to make it to the car. And so understanding some of these things about the nervous system, what I found for myself as a father and my work as a child psychiatrist and then working with therapists and teachers and other people with parents, is that some understanding of the nervous system and how it works can be very helpful in understanding what's happening with our kids and what to do next.
Yeah, wow. It's so interesting, isn't it? I'm sort of I've always had a lot of curiosity about the rate of change in the societies that we live in. It was only probably 150, 200 years ago where kids lived in a very small piece of real estate. And mum and dad didn't really go anywhere because they didn't have cars and maybe there was a horse and cart or whatever, but kids were sort of just lived around the home and maybe in that vicinity. But now the kids that are being born are being thrown in cars and hauled off to malls and taken here and taken there. And I wonder whether there's been enough sort of evolution in our species for kids to be able to cope with that. And so what you're saying rings so true, that kids, I suppose that it's the familiarity of that maybe that toy, that bunny they want to take with them, or I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, for the nervous system, The familiar is safe, and the unfamiliar we often react to as if it's dangerous. I think the nervous system has a motto that it's better to be safe than sorry, so that if we don't know what something is, if we treat it as potentially dangerous first, and this isn't something that goes through our thinking brain, this is an automatic reaction. There's a part of our nervous system that's always evaluating, is this safe? Is this dangerous? And having something that bunny, because it always goes with me, that's what helps me to feel safe, because I have that familiar thing, especially if I'm going someplace I haven't ever been before. Now I'm going to take some of my familiarity with me. I had that experience in Italy a few years ago, and I had rented a car and I was driving around Italy with my family, and I needed to figure out how to get places. But I had my iPhone with me, and my iPhone had Siri, and Siri gave me the directions. And I found that that had a very much of a calming influence on my nervous system, because here was this familiar voice telling me, turn left here, turn right there, you know, you got another 100 yards to go. And it was like, hey, I've got a friend in the car that knows their way around Italy telling me where to go. And I was like, that's really weird.
Yeah.
My phone is giving me these signals of safety and comfort.
Wow. That's so interesting, isn't it? It's I'd never thought about it that way, but you're dead right. And it's you know, it relates me back to when I was a single dad for quite some time. And when my son was sort of starting to grow up a bit, I looked at it and I thought, well, I don't want to parent like my dad did. And I'm not saying my dad was a bad dad. I loved my dad, but he was pretty, you know, he could be pretty rough at times and very reactive. I thought, I don't want to do it that way. And I was referred to a woman by the name of Carolyn McLean, and she ran parenting workshops. And I used to go every Wednesday morning for 2 hours. I went for a long time, and she would go through all sorts of stuff, you know, and she gave me some incredible advice. And one of the things was that if you're going somewhere with your kids that they haven't been to before, you need to prepare them and talk them through and tell them what it's going to be like, and try to create a picture in their mind that gives them some familiarity so that when they arrive there, it's not a completely strange place. And I found that that worked incredibly.
And so it turns out that has good evidence for why it works in the nervous system. Again, because the familiar for the nervous system is something that's safe. And so, yeah, you're making something that's coming, something that is familiar.
Yeah.
Also, as parents, we can start to treat unfamiliar things as adventures. And so if you're going someplace, and these days you could put it in ChatGPT and you could figure out all about where you're going. Like behind you, and I'm looking at you, is the cricket stadium, right? If I was going to come visit you, I could Google that cricket stadium and I could find out all about it, and maybe even look around where my seats are and find out where the restrooms are and where's the concession stand and everything like that. So I could tell my kids those things. Or I could say, we're going to this place we haven't ever been before, and it's going to be a grand adventure. But now, instead of having reference points of where I'm going to be, my reference points could be questions or things to look for. I wonder if we're going to the beach. I wonder what kind of birds we're going to see. Let's just imagine what kind of birds we're going to see. I wonder if we'll see any fish jumping out of the water. What will the people be like there? What do you think the sand is like? Do you think it's going to be the white sand, or it's going to be more rocky? Are there going to be jellyfish? So now we have an adventurous spirit that's coming. We don't necessarily need to know all about it, but we're going to do this together, and we're going to have an adventure together. And you and I are going to find out things that we don't know yet. And that'll be really fun too.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I get it. That rings so true, because kids are adventurous. You know, I remember when my son Shane was 6, I took him on a trip. And one of the things that I'd done as a parent, right or wrong, I used to lay down with him every night for about half an hour, and we would talk. Or we'd read a lot of Winnie the Pooh. He loved Winnie the Pooh. But we would talk, and I would tell him stories about my childhood, because for whatever reason, I've got very clear memories right back to when I was 2 years old. And I would give him a lot of detail and tell him, he would ask me questions, and he just loved it, you know. So, and see, my first 3.5 years of my life was living on a cattle station, or what Americans would call a cattle ranch. It was a very large cattle station that my dad managed. And then from there, they moved and ran a dairy farm. And then after 3.5 years of that, they moved into a country pub.
which we were lived in for another 3.5 years before they sold that and moved into the big city of Melbourne. So they moved 2,000 kilometres to Melbourne. And so I took him on a drive to take him to those three places, the cattle station, the dairy farm, and the pub in the little town. And he was inexhaustible for that trip. And the first leg of it was driving from the Gold Coast right out to the cattle station. It was a 5-hour drive. And it was like he was sitting there craning over, looking into the distance for 5 hours. He was just so excited by the adventure, and I just realized that kids have got that incredible thing, and if you can light that fire of curiosity in them, anything's possible. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it turns out that curiosity comes when we're in that relaxed and engaged state.
Yeah. Wow.
So if we think about these three states, fight and flight, everybody's heard of that.
Yeah.
A shutdown state, that's where we're disconnected from the things around us. But then the relaxed and engaged state, we're not curious when we're in fight or flight.
Yeah.
We're just going to take action, right? We're going to take action, make things better. It's just going to happen right now. I must do this. I'm not going to be curious about it at all. But if we can relax enough because we're safe enough, then our curiosity comes online. It's what's called an emergent property. It comes out. It's just natural to be curious when we're feeling good, when we're feeling like, we're safe, we're with our dad, everything is good. Now we can go explore the world. There's two functions that parents play, and this is in attachment theory. And typically moms play one more and dads play one more, but it can be the other way around, and dads can play both and moms can play both. But one's called a safe haven, and that's a kid goes out and explores, but then they get a little nervous and they come back and they get comfort. Oftentimes that's the mom that's providing that safe haven that gives them comfort. Dads, on the other hand, provide what's called a secure base, and the secure base is a place from which you go explore the world. And this is what you're talking about. We're going on this adventure together. We're going to see the cattle station where dad grew up when he was a little boy. And this is a grand adventure. So together, we're in this safe haven, and we're going to go on this adventure.
Yeah.
You actually have to feel safe to be adventurous. You have to feel safe to take risks. You have to feel safe to try things new. And so he must have felt so safe that he could go like, what the heck is this place going to be like?
Yeah, wow. Makes so much sense. So my next question to you then is that we've got all these dads out there in the world, and many of them are going to tune into this podcast, and they go to work. They might have a white collar job, a blue collar job. They might be self-employed, and they've got the pressures of their day, and they come home and they've got to find their way to land in this place with their kids. How do they do that?
I have so much respect for the parents that I work with and my friends who are parents. And I have a online parent support community, and I have guests come on. And a neuroscientist by the name of Dr. John Balin was on recently. And you know what he said? He said that parenting is the most challenging thing we can do with our brain. So you've asked me a question, but what you've asked me is, all right, now the dad has been at work all day, and now he's going to come home and parent. He's going to do he's already worked 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. Now he's going to use his brain for the most challenging thing that he can use it. All right. So I just want to say that to start with.
Yeah.
Because let's give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, we're not just saying, oh, come home and he's going to play Legos. Like, that's an easy thing. Maybe it is an easy thing to play Legos. Like if I play Legos with you. But if it's my 4-year-old, I have to be paying attention in a particular way in order for them to feel like they're connected with me and that kind of thing. And probably I just want to take my shoes off and read the paper or turn on the television or, open a cold one, whatever it is that I do to relax. And instead, I'm going to use my brain for this very challenging thing. So that's the first thing. And so sometimes a dad, a mom that's coming home needs to have a little bit of a buffer zone, so that they have a few minutes. Now, if mom is at home and I'm coming home, then I need to have an agreement, because she might have just been seeing if she could make it until I got there. And now, like, hand over. All right. So we got to find some way that when I walk in, I'm a little bit refreshed even after my long day. That's the first thing. Maybe we all go for a walk together, for 10 minutes around the block, or I'm going to take the dog for a walk, or something like that, or I've got to go change out of my, if I had to wear a tie to work, which I haven't done in many years, if I had to wear a tie, I'm going to take my tie off. And now I can make a deliberate pivot to paying attention to my child. And I want to be able to see them as the most delightful thing ever. No matter what somebody else tells me about how their day was, I'm going to be looking at them as the most delightful thing ever. Because if they feel like I'm seeing them and I see who they really are, like it feels like what you're doing with your son, they're going to love that. Their nervous system is really going to love that, because being seen for who we are also is one of the things that relaxes our nervous system. So now we come home, we see them for who they are, and then things can unfold. But we need to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and prepare our nervous system for this thing that we're getting ready to do. Is that too weird to talk about the nervous system?
No, not at all. I actually I've had a couple of men say to me that they figured out how to do it. And one of them was white collar and one was blue collar. And both of them, on their way home, they stop somewhere and park where there's a lot of trees, there's parkland, and they just sit there in their car and basically meditate for 10 minutes, just to bring themselves right down, calm themselves from their day, so that when they walk in the front door, they're calm. Yeah.
See, so John Wineland is a men's group leader that I follow, and he says that men need three things: nature to get restored. They need time in nature, they need time doing nothing, and they need time with other men. And if you can have all three of those things together, where you're with your pals in nature you have no responsibilities, you can just hang out, that's great. And your guys have had two of those three things. They're by themselves, they don't have any responsibility, they've left work, that's done, they haven't gotten home, that hadn't started, and they're in nature by themselves in those trees. That's lovely.
Yeah, it's very, very smart, isn't it? It's so interesting. I mean, all the challenges of parenting, from supporting our kids through sport if they want to be sport, and being a supportive parent without being an overbearing parent, or feeling those times when we're pushing our kids into things because we want them to do them rather than they want to do them. All big challenges of parenting, and we can easily see other parents who are doing it badly. But then, you were talking earlier about when your kids are distressed and how you navigate that space, because I watch it, I see when kids are distressed, parents get to that point where they don't know what to do and they become reactive, and then it becomes a battle of wills. And it ends up in a bad place, and it ends up in some regret, but you've got some really good guidance, and I'd love it if you could take us through that, because I think it's really beautiful.
Sure. I'll show you a slide here in a minute. But what I'll say first is that when your child is distressed, they're probably in the state of fight or flight, or in a shutdown state a little bit. And you can't move forward. You can think of that as a yellow light and a red light, and the green light is that relaxed, engaged state. So you can't go forward till your child's in the green light state. So that's really your first goal. You have to shift your own gears, because you may be headed out the door, it's time for bed, get in your bed, whatever it is that is going to happen next, but they're in distress. So we've got to do something to help them calm down. The other thing to know is, I think we're not too far apart in age. So people of our age, especially men, we were told, just tough it out, whatever the distress is. Don't cry, big boys don't cry, that kind of thing. And what I've been learning about is how you actually can help toughen up somebody's nervous system to be able to handle really difficult things. Because we all have, as adults these days, difficult things to handle. So what I'm going to show you is actually, I call it using tenderness to build mental toughness. Wow. So I'm going to see if I can share this.
George, I've got to tell you, I love that. That's so in my lane, using tenderness to build mental toughness. I love that.
All right, well then let's take a look at this. So, and I put in, how do you build mental toughness and continue to have an open heart? Because one way of building mental toughness is by teaching your child to shut down. But then they're shut down, they're mentally tough, but they can't connect anymore. They can't connect with their wife. They can't connect with their partner. They can't connect with their kids. So I think of this, one way I think about this is we're becoming an emotional intelligence personal trainer. And it's a little bit like going to the gym. So I have a personal trainer named Will, and he has me do HIIT training, high intensity interval training. So we can think of your child's distress as a weight that they need to learn to lift. So that's what they're going to the gym to do, is to lift that weight. And their high intensity interval is for them to be able to focus on their distress for a few moments. And we can help them with that. And we help them by, we focus on it with them. We're actually leading them to focus on it. And we're using acceptance and empathy to be able to create a space for their distress and to let them know that they're not alone in it. So acceptance is, it is what it is. That's a very dad attitude if we use a stereotype, right? You know, dads seem to like, it is what it is. This experience is what it is. And we can also empathize with it. What does it feel like to be in that distress? So maybe your son's best friend at school, they had a fight, you know? Okay, well, it is what it is. I'm going to let him experience it. He's going to hold that weight for a bit, and I'm going to be there with him. Just like Will is with me in the gym, I'm going to say, that's tough when your buddy is upset with you, when you have a fight with your buddy. That's a tough thing. That's empathy. We say something like that. And when we do that, we're holding that weight, but we're only doing that for a short amount of time. And then oftentimes our kids will change the subject and they're actually going into recovery themselves. They're like, I lifted that weight long enough. I need to put it down now. Will's like, can you do 3 more? I think I can do 1 more. All right. And the way that we help there is if they change the flow, the subject, we follow them. So in one therapy, this is called lead, follow, lead, or follow, lead, follow. And we let them go and talk about something else. They're talking about their buddy. And now they're talking about, hey, are we going, you know, to the park on Saturday? We go with them and talk about that. That's the rest between times. And we can be playful and curious. There's that curiosity again. While they're in this recovery phase. Now, here's where mental toughness comes in. Let's lift that weight again. We go back and we're going to lead them back. You know, I had another thought about your buddy and you having that fight. We're bringing the subject back. And we're accepting, again, like this is, I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, I know that nobody wants to talk about their fights with their buddy. You know, it's so hard to talk about fights with their buddy, you know? It feels like we don't know what to do about it. We don't know how it's going to go. It feels just so yucky. We've gone back here. And then they're like, well, do you think I could spend the night with this other guy? Now he's going back to recovery. And we go back and forth. And this is actually builds a muscle for us. Here's a picture of my son, and he's with my friend Dick. So I don't think my son would be able to look at that bucket, which has a fish in it. He's gone fishing. Dick has taken him fishing. And Seth is a little bit nervous about the fish. But because Dick is there, Dick is actually helping his attention. They both have their attention on the same thing. And Dick's attention holds Seth's attention there and lets him stay in that rep for a little bit longer. And then they probably take a break. Maybe they come back then and clean the fish, take a break, come back and cook the fish, you know, and they've gone back and forth. And so what builds the muscle is the number of reps, not just can they stay with it this one time. Doing 100 reps of 10 pounds is much more important than trying to lift 1,000 pounds once. We can't do that, but we can lift 10 pounds 100 times. And that's what builds our muscle.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and so then what that does is it builds what's called distress tolerance. So then Seth can build distress tolerance, and that's where the mental toughness comes in. But it's also built in with some compassion for oneself, because we've had this empathy as a part of the high intensity interval, that each of the reps, we have somebody there with us, like my trainer is there with me, you know, like you're doing a good job. He said, that's what I'm talking about when I do it good. And so now I can do it in a way that I feel like I'm able to make progress on my goal of becoming stronger, because I'm not in it by myself. And I get to be tougher that way.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think that one of the things that I'm seeing from that is that men who take this technique on and use it, every time they use it well, their own confidence as a father improves, and their confidence in themselves improves.
Yeah. And if your listeners want to download this, if they go to drgeorge.club/PDF, and maybe you can give them that link, they'll be able to download that for free.
Absolutely.
Yeah, their confidence will improve because they've done a rep as well as a father.
Yeah.
And here's something really interesting that I learned. I don't know so much about cricket, so I'm going to talk about American baseball.
Yeah.
But when we're listening to our kid in this kind of attuned way, that's really helpful. That attuned listening helps them to be able to stay with the distress for a bit. And then we're attuned to them changing the subject. We're attuned to them going back.
Yeah.
And I used to think that attunement was like taking a test in school, and you needed like 80% or a 90% to do good. I needed to attune 80 or 90% of the time.
Yeah.
But it's more like 30% of the time is good enough.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about I had a friend, Brandon, said, yeah, if you have a 300 batting average, that's Hall of Fame stats, and like, oh, that's right. Like you're a Hall of Fame dad if you're attuned 3 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Isn't that hopeful?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that one time that we didn't do it. We come back and we repair, we say, man, I don't think I was paying attention to you as much as I would have liked to yesterday. Can you tell me again what you were going through? I really did want to hear, and I felt bad that I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And that's fine. 7 out of 10 times, that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as we come back and repair at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. And I see that what this also provides, George, is that there'll be men who have got friends who are struggling with their kids and struggling with how to parent their kids, but this is something that they can give them and help them with, so that they can get a better chance to improve their relationship with their kids.
Absolutely. And they can actually use this same process with their friend and say, like if you said, George, I didn't, I'm a little struggling with being a dad. And then I just say, okay, well, tell me about it, John, and then you tell me about it a little bit, and then you change the subject, and you told me about the fish you caught. And then maybe I go up and say, I had another thought about what you said about being a dad. It's hard for me too. Now I've brought you back to it, got another rep going. You change the subject again. I can come back one more time, and we get a third rep in, and we're a little bit stronger. And we're connected, and that feeling of connection with each other also helps our nervous system to feel, hey, I think we can do this.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's like, we both in the Avatar course use the tool, the releasing fixed attention, going back and forth, and how that sort of opens up, it creates space for new viewpoints, and sort of relief comes, and sometimes epiphanies as well.
Exactly. The releasing fixed attention goes back and forth between describing something that was upsetting and then describing something that you just see around you. And I'll tell you a story from when Seth was just before he turned 2. We went to this shopping area, and there was a mechanical snowman, and it was kind of frightening. I agreed, it's kind of frightening. And so Seth, we're driving back home, and Seth is saying, me no like snowman. and so we were doing this, we were saying, yeah, that snowman was really scary. Gosh, he was so big. Hey, look, there's a cow out the window. You see that cow? It's black and white. And then we're like, that snowman was really scary. Yeah, me no like snowman. And we just went back and forth. And after a while, he wasn't afraid, and he wasn't fixed on the snowman anymore. And we got that idea from the Avatar course, from the releasing fixed attention exercise.
Yeah, so cool. And for any listener who's a little interested in that, there's a wonderful mini course that you can download for free off the Avatar website called Awareness, and it's an attention management mini course, and that exercise is in there. It's a really cool one to have a look at. It's so George, I want to jump across a little bit now. I mean, that stuff's so helpful. You were keen to have a conversation about the name of my podcast, which I'm really open to, and it's because I've got a really good friend. He's a brilliant guy. We studied physical education together. We were both football players. That's Australian rules football. He played at a higher level than me. He was a pro. And we also shared a house. And on December 13th, 1983, we both flew to the US and he never came back. And he lives up in Washington State and he's a brilliant artist.
He's okay. He didn't, it wasn't one of my fellow Americans that did something to him. He liked it and decided to stay himself. Okay, good.
He always loved America, and he does these amazing pieces of art where he draws all sorts of animals, birds, fish, etc., on stainless steel with a grinder.
Holy cow.
Like, his work is extraordinary. In fact, what I'm going to do is we'll just take a little pause in the podcast. I'm going to bring up one of his pieces of work for you to have a look at. It's quite extraordinary. And the reason I bring him up is because he was really challenged by the name of my podcast. And we never resolved a difference of opinion, but that's okay too,
That's distress tolerance. That's right there in action. Distress tolerance. If we can have different opinions and we can tolerate the distress that causes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen.
Oh my gosh.
Can you see that?
That's beautiful.
So he does that with a grinder on stainless steel.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Incredible, isn't it? And
Yeah.
he does fish and he does beautiful eagles and all sorts of things. It's really quite amazing. So yeah, that's opens up the topic, which I think it's a really cool topic to discuss.
Let me just say this, the thing that I'm curious about is just a minute ago, you told your audience about a course called Awareness, and yet your podcast is called Not Woke, which to me sounds like not aware. And so it didn't seem to fit together, because I know that you're a person that's into awareness, wellness and well-being and things like that. And awareness is part of that. And so I was very curious about the title of your podcast.
Yeah, and it's and it's a really great question. And so I dived into the term woke because it became, it was sort of almost became overarching. Where it came from, and it actually comes from African American slang of if a person was awake, they'd woken up, so they woke, yeah. And so woke was a sort of a slang term for being awake. And what I've found out in the world is there's various groups of people that think they have got some knowledge that other people don't have. Like, for example, there was a lot of it during the pandemic. There was a lot of theories that people had. Some might call them conspiracy theories. Some of them have turned out to be true, but they called themselves as being awake because they knew and others didn't know. It didn't mean that they had an awakened, enlightened consciousness. And this streamed across into the areas of environment, gender, and a big one was a big one, and people thinking that I know how things should be, those people don't, so I'm awake, and they're not. Whereas actually it was just two different groups with different viewpoints. So that what the woke tended to fall into was a thing, a set of ideas that were perhaps attributable to the people with left leaning, but not everybody. But what happened is it became the realm where activists pushed it so hard, it became overarching, where perhaps even a minority view became very powerful and over sort of dominating, I suppose. And so it was everything was pretty much thrown under this banner of woke, whereas it was really an extremist sort of activist viewpoint. Now, I actually don't have a problem with it because I believe that humanity is evolving always, but it's always clumsy, it's never linear, and sometimes it looks like things are going backward. But what humanity does is it explores things. And it explores things and it gets to a point where it goes, well, okay, that didn't work very well. Let's move over here. And we go through these things. And I think that this is all been part of the exploration, the curiosity of humanity. But at the end of the day, we work out what works and what doesn't work. Now, this is a little bit long, but there's another part to this that I was always really curious about. And you understand what it means to develop a really good, reliable moral compass, you know, and to really be in integrity with yourself. Because sometimes that takes a lot of courage, because what you feel is the right thing to do goes against what everybody else does. Now, that pathway to developing that moral compass requires a lot of mistakes, a lot of moments of feeling stupid, of feeling humiliated because your ego got out of control. But as you go, you start to integrate those parts of yourself, and you land more in who you really are and tend to live more from your heart, and you can feel your way through life, making your decisions from what feels from your moral code is the right thing to do. But I think when times were tougher, people were almost forced to take that journey. Some Indigenous cultures celebrated that journey, but in modern Western culture, you can avoid that journey. You know, but the problem is there's part of you that knows that you've avoided that journey. And so it gets to the point where we feel like, and this is just my theory on it, and you're much more learned than me on it, so you'll have some really cool things to say, where we need to demonstrate to the world that we are moral and virtuous. So we find some cause and jump on board and become a huge supporter, and we assert all this supportive dogma about whatever the cause is. It could be the environment, it could be LGBTQ, it could be Marxism, it could be all sorts of stuff. But it's all virtue signaling, and it's false morality, and it's a sort of it's a very dark side road to the richness of actually diving in it and doing the work. So, and I feel that somewhere along the line, a lot of the areas of woke sort of gathered a lot of those people, and it became very noisy. And the reason I chose the word not woke is because I wanted all the men out there to just feel safe to come in here and know that they're just going to get some conversations, and they're not going to get hammered with viewpoints of how they should be. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it probably stirs up a lot of feelings, you know, amongst different people.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about people's awareness and their awakeness, and you're a person that is in favor of people waking up. And at the same time, if I use my awakening to make it seem like I'm right and you're not right, you're wrong, then it's like I've used my awakening in not a good way.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of, do you watch Ted Lasso in Australia?
Look, I haven't seen it yet. I'm not a big TV watcher, and people tell me I've got to watch it, and I will watch it because so many people have recommended it.
Well, there's this one scene, and Ted, who's this American soccer coach who's come over to the UK, is playing darts against the ex-husband of the team owner, and I think he owns the team too. Somehow they still own it together. I haven't seen a lot of the episodes, but I've seen this one. Anyway, he makes this big bet in this dart game, and he pretends that he doesn't know how to play darts, but he actually is good at darts. But at a certain point, he says that he had this epiphany when he saw this quote from Walt Whitman that says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I think that's kind of, I was thinking about that, you know, and he was saying that the guys that had judged him, he realized they weren't curious. And I think what you're talking about is being curious. So there's a kind of awakening that keeps your curiosity intact. And then there's maybe another kind that makes you judgmental. And if we can be curious, not judgmental, then we have this kind of beautiful awakening that makes room for what other people see as right and wrong. And we can create space for everybody's perspectives to be added to the conversation.
Yeah, you bet. It is so, and I think what comes with that, George, and I think that's so spot on, is the capacity to listen with curiosity and not judgment. And I know that's a battle for me sometimes, when somebody's speaking and stuff that really goes against my beliefs, it's so hard to remain curious and not have judgment on it. But that's my journey,
And so that's a good definition of what I was talking about as attuned listening, is listening with curiosity and being non-judgmental. So if I could, I'm gonna show one more slide.
Yeah, please.
I brought one more slide, and so that's the one we were just looking at. But then here's attuned listening, and I loved your definition: listening with curiosity and being non-judgmental. So when we listen that way, sometimes we say we're just listening, as if it's not really valuable. But that kind of listening that you're talking about, especially when we do it with our kids, our spouses, is very powerful. And when we listen to our kids in this way, we're supporting and expanding their experiences of events, emotions, sensation, the mind. I put the self in a capital letter, that true self that we are. So when we listen, we actually are expanding their ability to be in connection with themselves. And so if your idea of not woke means curious and not judgmental, then I'm totally on board with that idea, because it really brings out the true self of the other person. We can see who they are, for who they are, their uniqueness, the things that they've had in their life that are challenging, the things in their life that have been heroic. And that kind of listening is a real gift to the world.
That's so beautiful. So beautiful. It's so funny. I'm a curious bastard, always have been. And I think that was the entire reason I went to an avatar course, because I was just so curious about it, And I was contemplating, and my beautiful wife, Lassen, who you know very well, wanted to go and do something. She wanted to go and buy some stuff at the shop, at the big sort of warehouse type store, and a bit like our version of Walmart. And I really want to do that. But then I thought, wow, what is that? And I realized that the real commitment to my relationship is to be able to overcome my resistance to the things that I don't want to do and find a way to enjoy them. And I've found that to be so cool, because whenever I feel myself hitting that place, I recognize it and I go, oh, wow, I'm back here again. So how can I enjoy this experience? But I feel it's the same when you're listening to somebody, and perhaps you've been caught off guard a little bit. You need to listen to actually just feel your resistance to it, so that you can land and just be present for however long it's going to take.
Yeah, I think sometimes we humans walk around with a little bit of agitation a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit of fight or flight, a little bit of adrenaline going through our veins. We need that. I look at the city behind you. Like, to walk around that city, it looks beautiful, but that's a lot of people, 5 million people. And so we need a little bit of energy. We need a little bit of adrenaline. We need a little bit of spunk to make it through the city.
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting down and talking to you, and I've got a little bit of my fighting spirit is online, but I don't need my fighting spirit to listen to you. I need my fighting spirit to have a seat for a bit.
Yeah.
And because I'm not fighting with you, I'm now curious about you, and I want to know, who is this amazing man that I'm talking to? What does he think? What's he been through? What's his day been like? Oh, that's right. His day's just starting. He hasn't had a day. I'm getting closer to the end of mine. You're just getting up and getting going. What's that going to be like? What's your day going to be like? So if I have my fighting spirit, I'm going to want to know, like, what can I argue with you about? What are you wrong about? That kind of thing.
How can I defeat you?
Exactly. How can I show I'm smarter than you, better than you? Yes.
Oh, God. And I'll tell you what, I've played that game a lot in my life, and it's an exhausting game. And and it traps you in your mind, because you come away from those situations and you're replaying scenario, and it's just, luckily I got out of that a long time ago, but it's so cool that you bring that up, because as I said to you before we started talking the podcast, yesterday I had 28 or 30 men in a room, and we're talking about men's well-being and healthy masculinity and that sort of thing. And some of those guys, they were all in logistics, so they're all wearing orange vests, and I had to wear an orange vest because the guys were sitting around on boxes in a warehouse. Just perfect setting for a talk, right? And some of them are really tough, masculine-looking men, and others are not. And I realized, I thought, wow, my viewpoint is going to these men who are tough-looking masculine men, but then looking at some of these other men who aren't, I'm thinking, I bet he's really tough. He doesn't look it, but I bet he is, And it's like I was just becoming aware of my sort of labels that were just automatically float around. Whereas if you just remove those and just go, actually, I don't even know this person, but boy, I'd like to get to know him,
Yeah. I think most men are working very hard to provide for their families, provide for their loved ones, to make a life. And they're doing it kind of without, not too much complaining. They don't complain about that.
No.
They don't complain. They may complain that it's hard to find a job that pays well, but they don't complain about, I shouldn't have to be the one that provides. I think men take on that role, largely, and they do it without complaining. Women do too.
Yeah.
But I think men have done that traditionally, and they just carry that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say, George, I have this conversation with chief executives sometimes of companies, construction companies and mining companies, or senior executives, that you forget who these guys really are. Because every time a disaster hits, like for example, a hurricane hits and there's flooding and there's people's houses have been destroyed, they're the guys who drop everything to go and help. And they'll go 48 hours straight without sleep if they can, because their desire to relieve suffering is so powerful. And I feel like sometimes in societies where everything's okay and where men don't get a chance to do that sort of thing very much, to exercise that part of themselves, part of them begins to shut down. And I've been on a campaign to encourage men to get out and find something in the community that they can contribute to that will relieve the suffering of somebody. Maybe it's the kids out there who are from broken homes, who haven't got a dad, or, whatever it is. There's multiple things, but I think that we forget sometimes this stuff around toxic masculinity, and men can get a bit labeled, but we forget about who they are. They're physically strong. They've got incredible ingenuity to overcome sort of physical universe problems, and they've got a profound capacity for guardianship, and I feel like if we can value that and remind them of that and help them to step into that space, I think that I have a sense that we can have a tremendous impact on our communities. And I had a little epiphany 2 days ago, and I really want to share with you about this, is that there's a lot of crime in our communities, a lot of disaffected youth, and they're running amok, and, it's too much for the police. And I wonder where all the good men are grabbing those kids and saying, hey, what are you doing? Come with me, I'm going to teach you how to go fishing, or, something like that. And I was reminded of the story of what happened to Yellowstone National Park when they reintroduced the wolves. The place was falling apart, and all they did was bring the wolves back, and everything found balance. And I just wonder what you think about that we're going to wake up the wolf in men a little bit, and that might have a beautiful impact on society.
What I would say, and I go back to the nervous system. It's been very helpful for me to think in these terms. And I have, I try and teach the parents in my parenting community about it. It's not like that there's a bad state of the nervous system. So fight or flight is not a bad state. It's just appropriate for certain times. That energy is appropriate for certain times and not for others. And the state of shutdown is not a bad state. I have a friend that says it's all about interstate travel, going between the states and not getting stuck in any one of them. And I think that what comes to mind when you talk about the wolf is a lot of times then if we're if we're told that anger is bad, and it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And the energy of anger is the energy of fight or flight. And fight and flight is about protection. And what do we protect? We protect the things that are the most precious to us. And the things that are most precious to us are our children, our spouses, our families, for most people. And if we're saying you can't have that energy of protection when you're what's most precious to you, your loved ones, are threatened, then we actually rob ourselves of a natural resource, which is our own power that comes from inside of ourselves, the wisdom of our nervous system, to give me a shot of adrenaline and say, I need to stand up and protect this person. That energy gives a mom the power to lift a car off a child, And so if we reintroduce the wolf and say, look, in its proper place, the wolf is an important part of our ecosystem. The fight or flight energy is an important part of our ecosystem. Things come into balance. It'll actually give us the energy to go out and do the things that we need to do.
Yeah. Wow. George, you're so wise. You've got so much to share. So I want to make sure that our listeners know where to find you and find your resources. Is it drgeorge.club?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
That's where to find the listening parent community.
Yeah.
And you can find me that way too. You can send me a message through there.
Yeah. And you've got so much to share. And what was the title of your first book?
It was called Polyvagal Theory of the Developing Child. And it talked about these kind of ideas and how it got applied to trauma, to medicine, to school, and to therapy. And how do we create safe places, but not in the last chapter, we talked about safety is the foundation, but it's not the destination.
Yeah.
So we're not just becoming safe to be safe. No, that's not what we're built for. We're safe so that we can go out and explore, we can go out and create, we can go out and love and enjoy the life that we've been blessed with.
Yeah, it's like building a house so that you've got somewhere to rest, but you don't lock yourself up in it. Yeah.
No. You get up in the morning after your rest and you go see the world.
Yeah, wow. Well, George, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Such a rewarding conversation. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you on course at some point in the not too distant future.
That would be awesome. I think maybe in July, is that the next time? Or June, end of June?
Yeah,
Avatar course in Florida. All of your listeners are invited to join us and to be curious and not judgmental and discover the power of the wolf.
Yeah, so beautiful. Well, thank you so much, George. Thanks for your time. And for all of you out there, don't forget, try to be that adult that you needed when you were a little kid and you were scared and or you just were feeling very vulnerable. So thank you for tuning in. Please share this episode with all of your friends and work colleagues, and that way we can all help each other just a little bit in life. So thank you, and thanks again, George.
Thanks, John.